Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I want to talk about Bill C-11, and I also want to give a hat tip to Michael Geist. He's the first person I saw talking about this particular issue, and so I'm going to link that in the description below. You should check it out. He does excellent work. He's always worth a read. So Bill C-11 will supposedly help small Canadian content creators like myself by promoting their work in Canada. What they're proposing to do is make companies like YouTube push up Canadian content, which means, of course, pushing down everything else. Unfortunately, this is very unlikely to help me or other small independent content creators. Now you might be thinking, Runkle, you're Canadian. You talk about Canadian law. You'll get boosted. Isn't that great? And maybe it's true that I'd get boosted, or maybe not. One thing that they look at in terms of declaring whether something is Canadian content or not is where you're spending your money, because they want to know that you're spending it here in Canada. That makes sense for a big production where you've got, salaries and craft services and all of these things, you're sort of spending a whole bunch of money. But for me, most of my costs are wear and tear on my chair. So there's not a whole lot of budget here, which means that even small expenditures can throw that way off. So let's say I decide to use some stock video. Here we go. I'm not sure what I'd use this clip for. I mean, check out the guy just slightly to right of center. I'm not sure what he's watching, but I feel like maybe he shouldn't be doing that at work. Anyway, the company I get these from is Australian. Whoops. Maybe I'm not Canadian content anymore because I bought a little bit of stock video from an Australian company. But it won't really matter because either way I get screwed. Whether or not I get declared as Canadian content or non-Canadian content, and so would other independent content creators here in Canada. If you get declared that you're not Canadian content, or if you don't get declared as Canadian content, then your content will be pushed down the rankings in favor of people who are, which means fewer eyeballs, harder to get noticed, harder to grow. People who want to see your content might not get to see it because instead YouTube has to show them some other thing, something that's, been declared as Canadian. And it's worth noting here that the people who will be most able to navigate the bureaucratic hurdles to be declared Canadian are not small independents. It's going to be things like the CBC and other big producers. So the little guy, of course, it's always the little guy who gets screwed. But let's say you are declared Canadian content, and you might be thinking, great, isn't that wonderful? They're going to, push my stuff to more people. This raises a different problem. YouTube tracks your metrics because what they want to do is they want to promote content on a different basis than Canadianisms. They want to push up winners and push down losers so that if a channel, it looks like it's something people want to watch, they want to show that to more people and say, listen, this is good content. Meanwhile, if your channel is something that nobody wants to see, they're going to bury that because they don't want to expose their viewers to content that is terrible. They want the experience for the audience to be good. They want to make the audience happy because that in turn keeps the audience watching, which makes the advertisers happy, which in turn makes them truckloads of money. So YouTube's financial interest is in showing people things they want to see, and they're very good at it. So they track what kind of people might like my videos and show those videos to those people. And by contrast, they don't show my videos to people who they think aren't going to want to watch it. And I don't really want that exposure to people who don't want to watch it, because YouTube tracks who clicks my thumbnails and who watches the content and for how long. If my click-through rate drops, YouTube starts thinking that maybe I've lost my mojo. I'm no longer as interesting. I'm just, I've lost it. And maybe they start thinking it's not worth showing my content to people, that I'm not as successful anymore. And if people don't watch through to the end because they click the thumbnail and they go, ooh, I don't like this. This guy, look at his hair, no thanks. Then YouTube thinks I'm boring and they don't want to show the content. So all of this matters a lot. It's very important that my metrics stay good in terms of YouTube continuing to promote my stuff. Instead, under Bill C-11, they'll have to show this content to people they know aren't interested, just so that they can tick the regulatory box of saying we showed enough Canadian content to enough Canadian eyeballs, regardless of whether they actually want to see it. So for example, they might show this to a francophone in Quebec who's going to sit there and say, "Non mais tabernacle, c'est qui cette maudite anglaise?" And great, now this is bilingual, so it's extra Canadian. This is not good for me. It's not good for the person seeing it. It's not good for YouTube. It's not good for anyone except for some out-of-touch politicians who have thought this might be a good idea without thinking through the implications. Maybe you're a Canadian who's producing some sort of specialty content, and one group that is likely to be producing specialty content like this is immigrants to Canada. Let's imagine that you've immigrated here from, say, Japan, and you do Japanese language content explaining the Canadian experience for a new immigrant, and these videos become popular in Japan, but maybe not so much here in Canada, because that's not your target audience. But then these videos start getting pushed to people who aren't interested simply because they're Canadian, and they think, well, we'll show this to other Canadians. But really your target audience is, people in Japan or India or the United States, anywhere other than, than here. And you might not actually, when you start recording videos, you might not really know where your audience is going to be. Let's say you start doing sort of physical comedy, and it turns out, you think that this is going to be of interest to Canadians, but it turns out that it doesn't really land here. But it really lands in, say, Germany or wherever, and you start getting a following there. That's something YouTube will notice and be able to promote, unless Bill C-11 makes them start messing with that. So to the metrics, we end up with content that might look like it's no good, when instead the problem is that we've forced YouTube or other platforms to market it badly. And I don't want to see that. I mean, I'm doing pretty well. At this time of this recording, I've got nearly 60,000 subscribers. I hope to keep growing, but I don't grow my channel by foisting it on people who don't want to see it. That's instead how I'd kill my channel. Right now, Canadian content is thriving on YouTube and other platforms. Canadians punch well above our weight in terms of the number of successful channels on YouTube. There are more successful monetized Canadian channels than you'd expect based on our population. The way to help Canadian content is not by screwing up our metrics. It's by letting us continue to kick ass at what we're doing, which is being entertaining and educational and worth watching. We're already doing that. There's no reason to mess with this. We're also talking about a worse experience for viewers, as you'll get shown stuff that YouTube knows you won't like just to meet that Canadian requirement. Your online experience might be a little more maple-scented, but it won't be any sweeter. So I'm really concerned about what this is going to do, and frankly, I think that this one needs to be sent back to the drawing board, and, they need to come up with a new model. Ideally, something that doesn't mess with what, for Canadians, is already a good thing. As I said, Canadians are already succeeding on YouTube and various other podcasts and so forth. We're doing just fine. Don't break it. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like this video. Please share it with your friends. I think this is an important topic. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: Canada's National Firearms Association, the CCFR, Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and at the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc-Olivier Damour, as well as all of the people at the $10 level who will be in the crawl immediately following. As I mentioned, Michael Geist was one of the, I think he was the first person to sort of spot this particular issue, but I think he's dead on here. So check him out in the description below. I'm a big fan of his work, have been for a long time. And thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge.